is going into prevention programs. Well, Mr. Speaker, if I'm not mistaken, the programs that are there for smoking cessation are in the range of $4 million, around $4 million. So we bring in $100 million, and we spend $4 million to convince people and to encourage them not to smoke. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say it's working, but I think most Nova Scotians and most members here in the House who drive by schools, who drive by areas where our young people gather, would still be alarmed at the amount of our youth in this province who continue to take up the habit of smoking. With all of the advertising that's been done, the education campaigns, the costs to our healthcare system, the pictures on the tobacco products themselves, which are quite disturbing, they continue to smoke. So I'm not saying that the government's efforts have not succeeded, but I think everyone would agree, and even the minister would agree, that the efforts have not been enough. And until we're prepared to take some of the tax revenue that is coming in for the sale of tobacco products and send a clear signal that we are going to invest that in smoke cessation programs, until that, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, there is a bit of an air of hypocrisy on behalf of the government to be saying they want to go after tobacco companies for the damage they've caused to our healthcare system and to our province and its residents, when on the same side, the Minister of Finance is more than happy to collect the tax revenue. Now, I know that he will argue that that tax revenue is going to the Minister of Health, for example, to help him deal with people who have suffered tobacco-related injuries. And that's probably the case where a significant part of that money goes. But where do we start putting an end to the problem? Or where do we start trying to at least control the problem to the point where it hopefully would become more minimal issue? And I don't know if we'll ever get to see that. But at this point, Mr. Speaker, we're a long ways away, because people are still smoking. And although the government has continued to raise taxes in the hope that that would discourage people from smoking, they're still buying the cigarette. Today, you can still walk into your average grocery store or corner store, and the first thing you're going to see walking in behind a cash register is going to be a great large display of cigarette products. People who came in for a loaf of bread or came in for milk, when they go to leave and cash out, the first thing that is there to attract their attention, it's not apples, it's not oranges, it's not healthy products, it's tobacco. We have asked the government to enact legislation that would ban these tobacco product displays. If someone wishes to purchase tobacco, let them ask for it and let the clerk go and get it from somewhere out of sight. That would do a few things, Mr. Speaker. First of all, we've seen a number of robberies because of the fact that tobacco products are so easily accessible and are right there on display. Maybe it would be a cut down in some of the crime. The government says it's concerned about crime, wants safer communities. Safer session is what this was supposed to be. There's an example of where they could do it. Second of all, the professionals have told us that having these displays where they are located are one of the temptations that continue to exist for people to continue smoking. So until we start making the changes as a province, that needs to be done rather than for the minister. And I certainly hope this is not the case, that in the future sessions when we get up and we question the Minister of Health or question the Minister of Finance, question the Minister of Health Promotion, that they're not going to say, well, we're doing something, we're going to court, we're going after big tobacco, so don't worry about the displays, don't worry about the kids who are still smoking, don't worry about the statistics, we're going to court. We've got a plan. That cannot be the government's only plan. So, Speaker, there's no doubt that that is going to be an important step. And today's legislation is an important step. But we certainly have to move forward on this. What I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, is that somehow the Minister of Justice and through the government could keep the opposition members, even the justice critics, for example, keep us abreast of what exactly is going on with the province's case. Give us frequent updates as to where we're at, what our chances are. And let us not wait till BC has gone to court and then to say, once a decision is rendered, okay, now we're going to go. We have to be there as quickly as we can once we have our case properly put together, which I know will take some time. But the government has an unfortunate habit of wishing to wait and say, well, let's see what's going to happen to BC, and then we'll go next. This is going to take years. From the time BC starts its action to the time we actually get a final decision, which I would submit to you, more than likely, if I had to guess, will end up in the Supreme Court before a final decision. Because I am sure Big Tobacco is going to fight this as long as they possibly can and as high as they can, which at the end will be the Supreme Court of Canada. So it is going to take some time, and we shouldn't be waiting for the BC government to have a final decision. Let's put our case together, let's get our facts, and then let us be able to start moving from there. One of the other aspects, Mr. Speaker, that I'd certainly like the government to indicate is if we are successful, and I don't think it's too premature to raise this, but if we are successful, where's the money going to go? Let's say we get a $1 billion award. Let's say we get a $10 billion award, or 5. Where's the money going to be spent? Are we just going to let it go into general revenue? Are we going to let it go to cut $155 checks on the eve of an election again? Is it going to go to cut? Is it going to go to cut personal taxes? Is it going to go for ministers' pet projects in their ridings? Where is it going to go? And I'm sure, knowing the history of this government, that they would never do such insidious things as that, but just to make us be all comfortable that that wouldn't happen, it would be nice if the Premier and if the government could tell us, here is our blueprint. They seem to be fond of blueprints. I think I've heard them talking about blueprints on a few subjects before. Not saying that I've agreed with their blueprints, but they're fond of them. They've at least put it out. So why don't we have some form of a blueprint to indicate to us where exactly would this money be spent if the government is going to be successful? So at least we would have an idea. At the same time, Speaker, we'd be able to debate in this House the merits of that blueprint. Because while the government may come and say we feel the money should be invested in this area, if we are successful, maybe the NDP and our caucus would also have some suggestions as to where we think that money should be spent. And what better place to discuss that than here in the House of Assembly, the place we've been sent, elected, duly elected from our constituents to debate legislation, to make proposals to government, and to try to make Nova Scotia a better place. I think sincerely that's why we are all here. That's what we're trying to do. But unfortunately, under our system, too often the government gets to control just how many suggestions they want from us and how often they're going to sit here to actually listen to our suggestions. More importantly, they seem to have a bit too much control over how many of our suggestions they'll actually accept, and unfortunately, the vast majority that they reject.
Order, please. Yes, all members take their conversations outside, please. Now, member for Richmond has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's an interesting point, because one of the members does raise the issue of the fact that the reality we find ourselves in, Mr. Speaker, is that there is going to be a new leader of the government. And under our rules, whoever is going to win that leadership technically becomes the Premier of the province. And one of the important things is for us as Nova Scotians and as parliamentarians to know exactly what this new leader has in mind when it is going to come to healthcare, when it is going to come to the case going against Big Tobacco, when it's going to come to where should the money be invested if we're successful. Hopefully, we will have the opportunity, and that under our system, unfortunately, we too often have to rely upon the media to be able to get these answers for us, because there really is no way for ourselves to be able to question the potential candidates unless we show up at one of their forums to ask these questions, and then I'm sure the Conservative partisans would question why we are going to those events to try to ask such questions. So it's an important element because unlike typical leaderships, Mr. Speaker, it's in this case, whoever wins the leadership becomes Premier, and obviously is going to have a direct say in the future of the province. Now, we don't know how long that say will be. It may be a week, it may be a month, it may be a very short period of time. But just the same, that opportunity is going to be there. So who is going to be able to take that position and to decide is very important. And one of the candidates that is announced this morning, we know, Mr. Speaker, was the author of the $155 check and the failed personal income tax cut. He was the former member from Clare. Sorry, jeez. That was another LeBlanc who also had a number of sins that I could talk about while his time here, but I'm referring to the former member from Argyll, who might soon be looking to become again the member from Argyll, but that's time will tell as to what's going to take place there. But, Mr. Speaker, that's one of the examples with this legislation of why it's also important for Nova Scotians to keep a watch. Is it Neil LeBlanc's intention to come in, and if there's money that's allotted in a successful court action, to give another $155 check, just happens to arrive 2 or 3 weeks or 1 week before an election campaign? Is it to give it personal income tax cuts? Because keep in mind, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier today was the same one that when he cancelled the tax cut, he said, I can't give the tax cut because healthcare needs the money, and the minute I get more money from Ottawa for healthcare, I'll give you the tax cut. Well, hold on now. Why are we getting healthcare money from Ottawa if you're going to turn around and give it as a tax cut? So I think it's clear to say that one of the Premier's major flip-flops during his time in office has been on the issue of tax cuts, the personal tax cuts. 1 minute you have it, next minute you don't have it.
Honourable Minister of Community Service on a point of order.
On a point of order, I'm just wondering if you could rule on the relevance of the honourable member's dialogue as it relates to the bill in question.
Well, it may not be a point of order. Certainly I want to remind the honourable member that this bill has already been debated in this House in second reading, the principles of the bill. He knows full well the rules around third reading. And I ask the honourable member bring his comments back to third reading of this bill for further comment, please. The honourable member for Richmond.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I certainly respect your ruling, and one has to keep in mind that the aspect of this bill, if the bill is going to be successful in allowing us to take an action, the big issue is going to be going after big tobacco to bring revenue to this province to make up for what they have cost us over the years out of Nova Scotians' pockets to pay for health care because of tobacco abuse. Now, if the Minister of Community Services isn't interested in seeing money coming from big tobacco to pay for what it has cost this province, for the devastation it has done to families, my own family, and probably families of most of the members here, if that is not of interest to the Minister of Community Services, then shame on him. But I will stand in my place, and I will show my support for this province going forward and taking on big tobacco. But let us not forget that if that money is going to come here and be given as a tax break, that is not going to go to help the families and to help the individuals that continue to suffer from tobacco-related illnesses. And if he does not see the relevance in that, Mr. Speaker, then that's quite unfortunate, and I believe that might be a reflection of his own abilities more than anything else. But let me take you, Mr. Speaker, for example. I spoke earlier and said that the revenues that are coming from tobacco-related taxes here in this province, I said it was over $100 million.
Please, the honourable member allow for an introduction, please. The honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to draw the attention of the House to our Speaker's Gallery and introduce two of the HRM councillors who have come down here today to visit with us. They've come down to look at the debate and join in the debate and hear what's going on. I'd like to introduce Councillor Len Gocher from Bedford and Councillor Linda Moser, and I'd like them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Thank you. The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think the Minister of Finance just indicated that they were in the proximity here for maybe another announcement prior to arriving here. But I think they may have found some of the debate last night to be a bit of interesting for their own constituencies, and something tells me that the Minister of Finance has probably provided them with a copy of the comments from last night, and I'm sure he provided all the favourable comments that came from our caucus on that. Certainly none of the negative comments, and maybe that bill will come back up for debate, and we'll have an opportunity at that time for our caucus to make some presentations. We were certainly very excited last night to hear the Minister of Finance speak on a private local bill, something clearly rare to see. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, when I was talking about the amount of revenues that do come in from tobacco taxes, which is all going to be part of this court case and part of this legislation, I did say over $100 million, and it's unfortunate the Minister of Finance didn't jump to his feet and correct me to say, honourable member, you're way off. Way off. Because, he knows that I was way off. But fortunately, one of my good colleagues was very helpful in providing me with the actual real number, which I'm more than happy to give the Minister of Education, who's taken a sudden interest in this debate. But, Mr. Speaker, that total was not 100 million. It was not 120 or 150. $177 million is what the Minister of Finance expects to bring in tobacco-related taxes next year, between now and next April. $177 million. And again, I submit that the investment going into tobacco cessation programs is in the range of $4 million. Now, I'm not good at being able to do percentages very quick on my feet, but 4 million out of 177, I think needless to say, is a very small percentage. And again, Mr. Speaker, I'm not in my place to say that none of those programs have had success, because they have. There are less Nova Scotians smoking today than there was years ago. That is true. And I think there's been all-party support for that particular, for that, Mr. Speaker. There's no question that all parties have supported that. The government has worked towards that. The previous administration was supportive, and I have no doubt future administrations will be very supportive as well. But we're a long ways away from achieving the success that we want to achieve, because there are still too many Nova Scotians who are smoking, too much who are ending up in our healthcare system, lives that are being cut short, lives that are being lost, and we have much more work to do. So again, I would urge the Minister of Finance, unlike his predecessor, to be able to say, I am prepared to take that money and put a greater investment into tobacco cessation programs. Imagine if he could have stood this spring and his budget said, I'm going to double or triple or quadruple the budget for smoke cessation in this province, because that is how important we see it as an issue. And even though the revenues, well, I'll find them somewhere else, because that's how much of a priority this is. That didn't happen, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would hope that the Minister of Finance, and I'm sure his officials who are quite wise, are not sitting back and saying, we can wait now because we know there's money coming. The chances of success in this lawsuit are still questionable. Unlike the US, our courts have not been as generous to these types of cases. Hopefully they are working their way towards a more middle ground into making sure that tobacco companies who are being held responsible in the US will also be held responsible here in the provinces and in Canada. But we do have a ways to go, and as I've said, it would be interesting if the Minister of Justice or the Minister of Finance or Minister of Health could stand in their place and tell us exactly how much work they have done to prepare for this. Has the Minister of Finance been going through all of the sales of tobacco products to get an idea of how much revenue has gone to tobacco companies because of sales to the province of Nova Scotia? Has the Minister of Health designated staff to start working? And I can't even imagine how they would even start sending this out, but hopefully they are talking to British Columbia and asking British Columbia, how are you quantifying the damages that you're going to bring as part of your lawsuit? Has that work even started? Right now, Mr. Speaker, we have no indication of that. We have a bill which is going to give the province an ability to take action, yet we have no indication of, are they preparing for it? Is there work that has been done to get us there? Or what exactly is their plan on that exact question? So, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, there's no question that we are supportive of this legislation. I think all parties have indicated their support. We do want the province to have success, but we do have a long ways to go. We have a long ways before we are ready for that. And as I've suggested to you, this is probably not going to end at the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia or at the Court of Appeal. More than likely, we are looking at a Supreme Court of Canada decision. Again, one of the issues that could be raised because of that is the Minister of Justice going to use our own counsel that we have working for the province, or is it his intention to get outside legal representation that may have some expertise in these kinds of matters? Not questioning the expertise or the abilities of our own legal counsel here in the province, but that is an issue that certainly it would be useful for us if he was able to clearly indicate to us what his intentions are in that regard. And again, as I mentioned, how prepared is the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Health? Where is the Minister of Justice? who is working on the file? Are they reviewing court decisions in the US? Are they reviewing actions that have been taken throughout the world? Because I'm sure that other countries as well, whether they be in Europe or Africa or Asia or wherever else, are more than likely also looking at this as an avenue to try to keep the tobacco companies accountable, more importantly, to try to recoup some of the millions and billions of dollars that have been spent throughout the world by administrations to try to deal with the devastating impact of tobacco. Monsieur le Président, si je pourrais prendre cette occasion pour vous dire quelques mots au nom du projet de loi 222. Monsieur le Président, comme je l'ai dit à la deuxième lecture, c'est un projet de loi que nous supportons comme un parti et le caucus libéral. Je sais que nos amis ici dans le Parti des Nouveaux démocrates ont aussi indiqué leur support, et ce n'était pas de question que le gouvernement lui-même, qui l'a proposé, va le supporter en même temps. Mais, Monsieur le Président, il faut savoir qu'il ne faut pas s'attendre que c'est demain que nous allons avoir un processus qui va commencer sur cette question. Plus important, ce n'est pas demain que nous allons avoir une décision finale sur la question est-ce que la province va gagner ou avoir le succès contre les compagnies de tabac pour le dommage que ça crée à la santé, aux familles et à notre province ici en Nouvelle-Écosse. C'est une question de la province et du gouvernement se préparer, soit dans le département de la santé, soit dans le département de finances, soit dans le département de la justice, à préparer notre plainte qu'on va amener en cours. Est-ce que nous savons aujourd'hui combien d'argent que les compagnies de tabac ont fait sur le dos des gens de la Nouvelle-Écosse qui ont acheté du tabac à travers les années? Est-ce que nous savons exactement combien que ça coûte au département de la santé et au gouvernement chaque année et pendant les années précédentes pour vouloir traiter les gens de la Nouvelle-Écosse qui ont souffert des maladies à cause du tabac? Monsieur le Président, je vous soumets que c'est une question qui va être très difficile parce que quand on va en cours, on ne peut pas juste aller en cours et dire on demande 3 millions. Et on est sûr que ce sont au moins 3 millions. Il faut être capable de présenter et de dire voici les numéros, voici les chiffres qu'on vous présente pour l'année passée, les années précédentes. Et c'est ici que nous vous présentons cela que ça coûtait à la province. Et c'est sans question que les compagnies de tabac vont questionner les numéros. Ils vont dire ben, c'est combien, comment est-ce que vous pouvez justifier ça, c'est où que vous avez pris ce chiffre-là, expliquez-la nous. Alors, c'est pour ça, Monsieur le Président, qu'avec ce projet de loi, que c'est nécessaire que nous avons plus d'informations. Et malheureusement, à ce point-ci, le gouvernement va juste se donner le droit. Il ne nous donne aucune information sur où est rendu le département de la justice, où est rendu le ministre des Finances, où se trouve le département de la santé. Est-ce qu'il y a un comité au niveau du gouvernement qui est déjà mis en place pour examiner cette question, pour se préparer? On ne le sait pas. L'autre question que j'ai soulevée, Monsieur le Président, en anglais, c'était la question que, allons dire qu'on va avoir le succès. Allons dire qu'à la fin de la journée, que les compagnies de tabac, la Cour va leur dire qu'il faut payer la province de la Nouvelle-Écosse, soit c'est des millions ou des milliards, pour le dommage qui a été causé par les compagnies de tabac à notre province durant les années précédentes. C'est quoi ce qu'on va faire avec l'argent? Et je sais que ça va prendre des années avec quoi ça arrive là, mais est-ce que ce n'est pas un beau temps d'au moins commencer le débat? De dire qu'est-ce qui sont les priorités des gens à Nouvelle-Écosse, qu'est-ce qui sont les priorités du gouvernement, qu'est-ce qui sont les priorités du parti NDP, qu'est-ce qui est les priorités du caucus libéral, NPD, je m'excuse. J'étais vous dire les socialistes, mais j'ai dit NPD à la place. Je me corrige. La prochaine fois, pour que je ne me trompe pas, les socialistes, c'est beaucoup plus facile que me tromper à utiliser les lettres. Alors, je remercie mon collègue de Halifax, Fairview pour ça. Mais en revenant, Monsieur le Président, au sujet, c'est la question de qu'est-ce qu'on va faire. Si on reçoit de l'argent, on a des compagnies de tabac, c'est où est-ce qu'on va l'investir? Est-ce que ça va aller pour couper les impôts personnels, comme il a été fait par le gouvernement ici avant la dernière élection? On se rappelle tous des chèques de 155 $ qui sont sortis. Juste avant l'élection, ça se donne. Est-ce que le gouvernement va encore proposer de couper les impôts personnels par 10%? Encore très proche d'une élection. Ou est-ce que nous allons avoir une indication concrète d'où est-ce que l'argent va être investi? Est-ce que ça va aller complètement au département de la santé? Est-ce que ça va aller envers la dette? Est-ce que ça va aller pour des moyens d'éduquer la population sur les problèmes du tabac? Est-ce que ça va aller au ministre de la promotion de la santé? On ne sait pas. Parce qu'à ce point-ci, on n'a aucune indication. Encore, malheureusement, on se trouve comme membre de l'opposition, comme député responsable, de vouloir donner l'autorité au gouvernement de prendre action au nom du niveau de la province de Nouvelle-Écosse, au nom de tous les gens de Nouvelle-Écosse, et on n'a aucune idée qu'est-ce que c'est leur intention à la fin de la journée avec ce projet de droit, s'ils ont du succès en cours. Comme je l'ai dit, M. le Président, c'est aussi une question au niveau du ministre de la Justice, même si le ministre pourrait nous dire aux membres de Collaboration Passage, qui est le critique pour la justice pour le parti NPD, et moi-même, comme critique de justice pour le caucus libéral, qui vont nous tenir au courant, soit tous les mois, tous les 6 mois, une fois par année, qu'on va se rencontrer et on va dire, nous voici. C'est où qu'on se trouve sur cette question? Parce que c'est une question qui a si tant d'importance, c'est une question qui touche si tant de gens de cette province, que c'est important qu'on ne regarde pas juste ceci, un dossier du gouvernement. C'est un dossier de la Nouvelle-Écosse. C'est un dossier de l'Assemblée législative. Mais pour faire ça un dossier qui est effectif pour la législative, il faut faire certain qu'à la fin de la journée, qu'on est informé, qu'on se connaît où nous sommes. Parce que pourquoi aller à chaque session de poser la question et demander au ministre de la Justice ou demander au premier ministre, c'est quoi qui est l'intention? C'est où qu'on se trouve? Êtes-vous prêt? Avez-vous fait certain que nous avons une plainte qui est bien présentée, qui couvre bien toutes les questions de droit, qui a les chiffres qu'on peut justifier? C'est ça, toutes des questions qu'on doit avoir. Alors, Monsieur le Président, c'est toutes des questions qu'on veut mettre. L'autre point que j'ai soulevé en anglais, Monsieur le Président, que je voulais soulever encore en français, c'est le fait que pendant que le gouvernement est tout prêt à nous dire on va prendre une plainte contre les compagnies de tabac pour vouloir récupérer l'argent qu'on a dépensé pour traiter des problèmes de la santé à cause du tabac, en même temps, il faut se rappeler que le ministre de la Finance, chaque année, est plus que content de dire « Je veux que les gens de Nouvelle-Écosse cessent de fumer ». Mais en même temps, il a la main dehors qu'il est mieux que content de recevoir l'argent, les impôts du tabac. Je l'avais dit au commencement en anglais, M. le Président, que je pensais que ce montant-là était dans les environs de 100 millions par année. Malheureusement, ce n'était pas mon intention de pouvoir mal diriger la maison, mais je n'étais pas correct. Ce n'est pas 100 millions. Je m'attendais peut-être le ministre des Finances s'aurait levé pour me dire non, membre de Richmond, c'est pas correct. C'est pas 100 millions, vous n'êtes pas même proche. Parce que, Monsieur le Président, malheureusement, et je remercie mon collègue de Clare qui m'a assisté, à la fin de la journée, chaque année, et on se propose pour cette année-ci, 177 millions qui vont être reçus par la province, par le ministre des Finances, à cause des impôts sur le tabac. Mais il faut se demander, qu'est-ce que c'est que nous sommes en train d'investir comme une province pour les programmes d'encourager les gens de ne plus fumer? Et si je ne me trompe pas, je pense que mon collègue de Glace Bay a indiqué que c'est dans les environs des 4 millions par année. Alors, on reçoit 177 millions des impôts et on investit 4 millions au programme pour encourager les gens de ne plus fumer. Alors, Monsieur le Président, si que nous pouvons dire que ça, c'est une indication que le gouvernement prend la question d'encourager les gens de ne plus fumer sérieux, bien, je vous soumets, Monsieur le Président, que leurs actions jusqu'à date est juste le contraire. Ils donnent très peu d'argent pour les programmes d'encourager les gens de ne plus fumer, mais ils reçoivent beaucoup plus pour les impôts qui vont à toutes sortes de différents projets à travers le gouvernement. Chaque année, Monsieur le Président, on le sait, presque chaque année, des fois 2 fois par année, le gouvernement a élevé les impôts sur le tabac. C'est sa question, que ça encourageait les gens peut-être de ne pas fumer si tôt. Parce que je vous dis que maintenant c'est cher, c'est envers quoi pour les cigarettes? C'est quoi, envers 10 $, je pense maintenant? Ça varie 8 $, 9 $, 10 $, des fois même plus. Et c'est beaucoup. On a encore des gens de la Nouvelle-Écosse qui fument 2 et 3 paquets de cigarettes par jour. Par jour, Monsieur le Président. Allons dire c'est 20 $ par jour. 7 jours par semaine, c'est 140 $. Ça, c'est juste une personne. Si l'homme et femme fument les deux, mais c'est beaucoup d'argent, juste une maison. Imagine qu'est-ce que c'est durant l'année. Mais ça continue, M. le Président. Et malheureusement, si on passe vers les écoles, si on passe vers les lois ou des centres communautaires où on trouve les jeunes, même ici en ville, on voit les jeunes qui sont en train de fumer. Il faut se demander, M. le Président, aujourd'hui, 2005, avec la connaissance que nous avons au tabac, le dommage que ça fait à la santé, les gens de nos familles qu'on a perdus à cause du tabac, combien ça se peut qu'on ait encore des jeunes, 13 ans, 14 ans, 16 ans, 20 ans, qui continuent à fumer. Pas juste ça, M. le Président, si je ne me trompe pas, les sondages indiquaient que même les jeunes filles fument plus que les gars. C'est terrible. Et ça continue. Le gouvernement continue encore avec le budget cette année, qu'ils ont juste investi 4 millions des programmes pour vouloir décourager des jeunes de fumer et les jeunes de la Nouvelle-Écosse de fumer. À quel point que le gouvernement va dire, c'est une crise. Il n'y a plus de fin. On connaît bien que le budget du département de la santé, c'est proche de la moitié de tous les revenus de la province. Un département, le ministre de la Santé, la moitié. Ça reste tout le reste du gouvernement pour l'autre moitié. Le premier ministre, quand il a premier été élu, il a dit, le problème de la santé, ça ne faut pas plus d'argent, ça faut de la meilleure direction, la meilleure administration. Il faut dépenser notre argent plus sage. Ben voilà, M. le Président, on sait bien que depuis 1999 à 2005, sous ce premier ministre ici, on investit aujourd'hui 800 millions plus chaque année qu'on dépassait en 1999. Bon. M. le Président, pour le premier ministre qui nous a dit que ça prenait de la meilleure administration, la meilleure direction, il a investi 800 millions de plus cette année. Et puis c'est le même premier ministre qui a envoyé un dépliant aux maisons pour dire aux gens, si ça continue, sur la route que se trouve maintenant, en 2025, tous les revenus de la province de Nouvelle-Écosse vont aller au département de la santé. Monsieur le Président, comment ça se peut, à ce point-là, que le gouvernement n'accepte pas qu'on est en crise? La dernière session, je vous soumets, Monsieur le Président, que c'est nous, dans le caucus libéral, le seul ici à l'Assemblée, qui a dit qu'il y a une crise au département de la santé. C'est rendu au point que l'argent, il n'y a pas de fin. On ne peut pas imprimer l'argent vite assez pour le département de la santé, et ça ne peut pas continuer. On est les seuls. Le NPD ne l'a pas dit, mais à travers la session, le premier ministre, il a rejeté. Il a dit non, le problème de la santé, on s'est réglé. Il n'y a pas de crise, n'écoute pas aux libéraux, non, il n'y a pas de problème. Faites pas attention que moi j'ai investi 800 millions plus depuis que je suis élu, que maintenant c'est proche de la moitié de tous les revenus de la province vont à un département. Il n'y a pas de crise. Mais nous voilà la journée où le budget du premier ministre a passé à l'Assemblée avec le support des NPD, il faut aussi indiquer. Le premier ministre a fait une conférence de presse et ils lui ont demandé qu'est-ce que c'est la question la plus importante que tu vas adresser maintenant. Et qu'est-ce que tu as sa réponse? Il dit, c'est la crise qui se trouve à la santé ici en Nouvelle-Écosse. On se trouve en crise. Il n'y a pas assez d'argent. Il n'y a pas de fin. Il faut adresser ça. Ben, heureusement, M. le Président, pour nous, c'était finalement, on va parler de la santé. On va réagir au fait que ça prend au-dessus de la moitié de nos revenus de la province, un département. Mais, M. le Président, la question que j'ai, et je suis sûr que mon collègue de Clare et mon collègue de Glace Bay et mon collègue de Preston se demandent aussi, qu'est-ce que le premier ministre a fait depuis ce journée-là? Parce que moi, je ne l'ai pas entendu dire rien. Je n'ai pas entendu un discours où il a parlé du problème de la santé, du problème que chaque année, la santé, ça prend plus d'argent. Et il n'y a pas de fin. Je ne l'ai pas entendu le dire une fois. Il faut vous dire, de ma reconnaissance, du temps que je suis ici à cette session, je ne l'ai pas entendu parler de ça encore non plus. Alors, comment ça se peut qu'on ait un premier ministre, à l'été, qui nous a dit qu'il acceptait qu'il y avait une crise dans le département de santé et que jusqu'à ce point ici, ils n'ont aucune discussion? Alors, il faut se demander, qu'est-ce qui va arriver au budget qui va être présenté au printemps? Est-ce que le ministre de la Santé va encore faire une demande au ministre des Finances pour plus d'argent? Parce qu'il faut avoir de l'argent à quelque part, parce qu'on sait bien qu'à cause du fait qu'il allait avoir, le premier ministre attendait de peut-être avoir une élection cet automne. Le ministre de la Santé a été faire des annonces, des investissements pour l'hôpital Saint-Martha's à Antigonish, des investissements pour des lits à longue durée au Cabreton, des investissements partout à la province. Ce n'est pas de question que ces investissements sont nécessaires. Mais, M. le Président, ça te pose la question encore. Si nous sommes rendus à 2,5 milliards maintenant, c'est à quel point qu'on va être rendu au prochain budget? Est-ce que nous allons surpasser 50% de tous les revenus? C'est ça une question. Et c'est ça une question que le projet de loi 222 est une partie d'adresser cette question. Parce que vouloir avoir une plainte à la cour contre les compagnies de tabac, il faut aussi en même temps adresser le problème et la crise qui existe au département de la santé. Alors, c'est pour ça, Monsieur le Président, que je soulève tous ces points-là. Et le fait que le gouvernement nous donne aucune indication, ça nous cause de poser la question, est-ce qu'ils prennent ceci sérieux? Est-ce que c'est encore un autre projet de loi qui est juste pour l'intention de vouloir donner l'impression aux gens de Nouvelle-Écosse qu'ils sont en train de faire quelque chose, qu'ils sont en train d'adresser les problèmes de la santé? Parce que jusqu'à date, autre que le projet de loi, c'est la seule question qui a à faire avec la question d'argent et la question du département de santé. Il n'y en a aucune autre. Peut-être que le ministre des Agricultures et Pêches peut nous dire qu'est-ce que c'est que le plan du gouvernement pour adresser les problèmes au département de la santé. Peut-être que même la nouvelle députée de Chester St. Margaret's aussi peut nous informer si elle a su qu'est-ce que c'est qui allait être le plan du gouvernement à cette question. Durant sa campagne, est-ce que c'est qu'elle a discuté ça à tous les portes? Est-ce qu'elle a dit, voici qui est notre plan? C'est ici qu'on va adresser les problèmes qui existent à notre département de la santé. Hein, Monsieur le Président, comme je vous l'ai dit, c'est une première étape. J'espère que toutes les autres provinces canadiennes vont nous suivre. Je ne dois pas dire nous suivre, on suit la Colombie-Britannique, alors j'espère qu'ils vont continuer à suivre la Colombie-Britannique. Mais j'espère qu'à la fin de la journée, c'est sans question. Et, Monsieur le Président, c'est peut-être même une occasion que toutes les provinces, à la place d'aller chacun pour prendre une plainte en cours, c'est peut-être bien une chose qu'on peut travailler des provinces ensemble à cette question ici, pour vouloir mettre plus de force derrière notre plainte, peut-être encourager les cours de prendre cette question plus sérieux. Et ça, c'est une option. Et je me demande, Monsieur le Président, quand les premiers ministres se rencontrent, tous les premiers ministres à travers du Canada, est-ce qu'ils ont ces discussions ici? Est-ce qu'ils sont en train de parler de la plainte contre les compagnies de tabac? Est-ce qu'ils sont en train de parler de les dépenses qui ont été vécues à travers des années des différentes provinces au niveau de vouloir traiter les gens qui ont souffert des maladies de tabac? Est-ce qu'ils parlent même les programmes qui sont mis en place dans chaque province pour encourager les jeunes, encourager tous les gens de ne plus fumer? On ne sait pas, Monsieur le Président, si ces discussions prennent place. S'ils ne prennent pas place au niveau des premiers ministres de la province, est-ce qu'ils prennent place au niveau des ministres de la Santé? Partout au pays. Ça, on ne le sait pas non plus. Parce que le ministre de la Santé, malheureusement, suit ce débat, que j'aurais cru qu'il avait à faire directement avec son département, aurait voulu prendre de l'intérêt. Il aurait voulu dire lui-même, dire aux gens de Nouvelle-Écosse, que ça coûtait à son département durant les années pour traiter les problèmes, les maladies à cause du tabac. Malheureusement, le ministre de la Santé ne nous dit rien jusqu'à date. Et malheureusement, j'espère que ce projet de loi va peut-être continuer et il va rien nous dire sur ça. Malheureusement, il ne va pas nous dire qu'est-ce que ce département est en train de faire pour se préparer. Qui est responsable? Parce qu'on sait bien que sous les départements, on a des sous-ministres, des sous-ministres associés, on a des directeurs, on a tout ça. Est-ce que ces personnes-là ont été mises en place pour travailler sur cette plainte? Est-ce qu'ils ont été mis en place pour poursuivre les objectifs qui sont établis dans le projet de loi 222? On ne sait pas. Et malheureusement, Monsieur le Président, je peux vous dire, c'est un peu d'une critique, mais c'est la réalité, que le gouvernement a l'habitude de vouloir passer des projets de loi, et là, on s'attend des années, des mois, des années, des fois, avant que le gouvernement va réagir au projet de loi qui a été passé par les membres élus ici à l'Assemblée. Alors, c'est pour ça que je vous dis, sans avoir plus d'informations, pour me rassurer que le gouvernement va réagir sur cette question et va le prendre sérieux. On a compris de vouloir dire oui, on va supporter le projet de loi et on laisse au gouvernement à décider quand ils veulent mettre ça en place. Monsieur le Président, c'est dommage parce que ça, on n'a pas d'option. Quand c'est gouvernement majoritaire, il n'y a pas de question. Il faut s'attendre que c'est ces choses-là qui vont s'arriver. Mais comme nous sommes gouvernement minoritaire, on s'attendrait qu'il y aurait un meilleur niveau de coopération qui prendra place ici, un meilleur niveau d'échange d'informations, d'échange d'idées. Et je peux vous dire que le Premier ministre sort de cette chambre, il dit à la presse, il dit aux journalistes, le gouvernement minoritaire fonctionne bien à cause de mon leadership. Je vous soumets, Monsieur le Président, ce n'est pas correct. Parce que le gouvernement minoritaire ici aurait pu travailler beaucoup mieux pour les gens de Nouvelle-Écosse. Soit que ce soit au niveau de la santé, soit que ce soit au niveau des services communautaires, soit que ce soit au niveau de l'éducation. On peut faire mieux. Et malheureusement, on se trouve avec un gouvernement qui n'a pas l'intérêt de faire mieux. Même sur un des grands projets de loi qui nous fait question à ce point ici, on a un ministre qui continue à dire, même quand nous avons entendu des interventions de différentes organisations, continue à dire, on tient la course, on tient la course, on tient la course. Hein, Monsieur le Président, malheureusement, à cause des événements qui ont pris place, j'espère que ça va changer. C'est dommage que ça ait pris des événements comme ça pour faire changer la tête de ce ministre-là en question. Mais à la fin de la journée, Monsieur le Président, je veux juste vous dire qu'aujourd'hui, c'est une étape importante que nous prenons. C'est une étape que malheureusement, ça va prendre des années avant que nous allons avoir les fruits du succès de cette étape. Mais on s'attend que le gouvernement va prendre cette question au sérieux. Le gouvernement va vouloir réagir à ce point ici sans hésitation et que je m'attends que quand nous allons arriver ici à l'Assemblée au printemps prochain, que je vais me mettre à ma place et je vais questionner le gouvernement qui va pouvoir me dire sans question où est-ce qu'ils sont rendus sur la question de cette plainte, où est-ce que le ministre de la Santé se trouve, le ministre des Finances, le ministre de la Justice et tous les autres ministres qui sont impliqués ici. Parce qu'à la fin de la journée, Monsieur le Président, on a l'occasion ici, pas juste de récupérer l'argent qu'on a dépassé ici à la province de les compagnies de tabac, nous avons aussi une occasion d'encore envoyer le message à nos jeunes, à nos gens, à travers la province, que ce n'est plus acceptable de continuer de fumer. Il faut mettre une fin au fumage ici à notre province. Si pas une fin, que ce soit une très petite population qui continue à fumer, mais il faut faire certain qu'on continue la guerre contre le tabac, parce qu'à la fin de la journée, ça va protéger les familles, ça va protéger nos gens, ça va protéger le département de la santé, ça va protéger le gouvernement. À la fin de la journée, je vous soumets, Monsieur le Président, ça va nous faire une province plus forte, une province plus attirante, une province en meilleure santé, une province qu'on peut être fier de. Et ensemble, si on continue à travailler à ce niveau-là, on peut réaliser cet rêve. Et avec ça, Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie pour votre temps et je suis très content de donner support à le projet de loi 222. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Recognize young member Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to stand for a brief moment as our health critic for the NDP caucus, just to bring some concerns on our part in our caucus. We do support this piece of legislation going forward, but we want to bring some awareness around the need for government to indicate that, the potential of us seeking revenue from this realistically is far off in the future, Mr. Speaker. Probably many years before we'd ever see a dollar brought to this province, and that's if this case is successful in the courts, Mr. Speaker. This government has stood many times in this legislature and promoted the fact that they like to bring a balanced approach to government and to policies and to legislation that we see, Mr. Speaker. We hear that, we've heard it quite often in this session, a balanced approach. Many of the questions brought by opposition members from our party and the Liberal Party the answer is we have a balanced approach as government. And I would like to just bring some examples of and make people aware of the balanced approach that government has with some of their policies, some of their spending that they do, Mr. Speaker. The member who spoke before me mentioned about the $177 million that this government takes in revenue from tobacco products, Mr. Speaker. That's a large sum of money. 177 million. And what do they spend out in advertising to try to deter Nova Scotians from smoking, especially our young Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker? $4 million. $4 million of that $177 million. Is that a balanced approach, Mr. Speaker? I don't think it is, Mr. Speaker. That's 2.4% of the income that they get from tobacco is spent on trying to deter people from smoking, Mr. Speaker. Another example would be the gaming revenue, Mr. Speaker. Again, it's around $176 million, Mr. Speaker, that we take in from gaming. And what do we spend on addiction services and promoting the fact that gaming is addictive and you know you have to do it properly and safely so you don't spend your family fortune. Approximately the same amount, Mr. Speaker, $4 million. Is that a balanced approach to address very important concerns that many Nova Scotians have with gaming addiction, with smoking addiction, Mr. Speaker? In our view, and I hope in the view of Nova Scotians, it's not a balanced approach. As the health critic for our party, Mr. Speaker, I meet with many interest groups out there trying to promote what the effects of disease in our province have on the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, and the spending that is required. And many of those groups, like the Atlantic Council for Diabetes, you know, I met with them recently, discussing, you know, the need to you know, hopefully invest in preventive medicine in diabetes. It's related to so many other causes of heart attacks, Mr. Speaker, and strokes that, you know, cost the healthcare system in our province millions and millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker. The same in tobacco. As a paramedic, I've witnessed those individuals who are suffering diseases like emphysema and other lung diseases, Mr. Speaker, that put a huge burden on our healthcare system, Mr. Speaker. The amount of money we have to spend to treat these people, Mr. Speaker. And we spend $4 million out of $177 million to try to prevent people from smoking, Mr. Speaker. That's not a balanced approach in our view, in my view. I know that some of the groups out there don't think it's a balanced approach. You know, the Nova Scotia Lung Association deal with a lot of the family members and those suffering from lung disease and trying to help them, you know, get the care they need, Mr. Speaker. A prime example, you know, I've mentioned it in this House before about a constituent of mine who was in the need of a lung transplant, Mr. Speaker, had to go to Toronto because we didn't provide that service here under our healthcare system in Nova Scotia. We're unable to provide lung transplants. So this patient, this constituent of mine, had to go to Toronto, Mr. Speaker, but didn't have the funds. MSI, the Nova Scotia government, would not pay for her to be in Toronto prior to her surgery, Mr. Speaker. And they would cover the costs, yes, once she entered the hospital, once she received her operation, once she was in there recovering, Mr. Speaker. But because she needed to be there, and it's the policy of the transplant team that she needs to be within, I think, a half hour of the hospital to wear a pager in case they do have a donor for her, you know, she had to incur this cost. And it's the people like the association, like Nova Scotia Lung Association, that promotes and advocates and tries to raise funds for these people, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to see, you know, the government make a strong commitment now when this piece of legislation passes and we jump on that train, I think, like many other provinces are about to do, to try to recover some of the costs of health care, that we make it, the government needs to make a strong statement that any revenue that comes back to our province because of this claim or this potential court case, Mr. Speaker, should go directly to you know, those areas in healthcare that are being affected by tobacco, Mr. Speaker. They should go and make that claim and go to the Nova Scotia Lung Association and find out you know, what areas we need to put more money in. It's a simple request, Mr. Speaker. Just tell us that, you know, this money is going to go directly towards helping those individuals who are suffering from tobacco smoking for years, Mr. Speaker, and that we can take that burden off the healthcare system free up more money that go into other areas of healthcare, Mr. Speaker, so that there's not such a burden on that system. That's all we're saying. That's the message I want to say.
And we want to tell
Is
that
this
to
government,
Neil.
prides itself on the statement of a balanced approach, but we see with the figures of $170 million taken in from tobacco and only $4 million going out in prevention. That's not a balanced approach. Make the statement. Take a balanced approach to any revenue that comes in from this claim goes directly to affecting the health care costs to those who suffer from tobacco-related sicknesses, Mr. Speaker. I think one of the things I've heard from a lot of the constituents in my area, Mr. Speaker, especially through this last session where we had this piece of legislation and the smoke-free piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, I've heard a lot from smokers. And I was amazed with some of the comments they said. They said, yeah, we're going to go and take the steps to becoming 100% smoke-free. We're going to go and take the steps to try to recoup some of the money from tobacco industry to cover the cost of health care. Why don't we just ban smoking? And they say this to me, why don't you just ban it? I know a gentleman who's been smoking for 30 years told me, tell them to ban it. It will force me to quit. He says, but you'll never see that because government depends so heavily on the revenue. And he said, they depend on me buying my smokes to bring revenue to the province. And he's true. It's true. It's a statement that you can't question. We depend so heavily on the revenue from tobacco, $177 million, Mr. Speaker. So if anything, I just want to encourage the government that they should stand up and they should state that any revenue from this, potential revenue, I would say, Mr. Speaker, would go towards addressing those health care costs of the individuals in our province who have smoked for a year, smoked for many years, or might even be affected by the secondhand smoke, Mr. Speaker, go towards addressing their health care needs and hopefully have conversations with the Nova Scotia Lung Association and other groups that have promoted less tobacco use in our province and take a true balanced approach. Not this title of balanced approach, but a true balanced approach where we won't see $177 million of revenue from tobacco and only $4 million going out, Mr. Speaker. The potential here is maybe billions of dollars we're talking, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to see 2% of $1 billion being spent. I want to see it all being spent towards addressing the healthcare costs to those individuals who are suffering smoke-related diseases, Mr. Speaker. So with that, I do want to say we support this piece of legislation going through, and I hope and I wait for that statement from government that they will take a balanced approach on this and invest all that potential money into the healthcare system to address the needs of those individuals who suffer related injuries and related diseases from smoking, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize the member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pleasure to rise and speak regarding Bill number 222, the Tobacco Damages and Healthcare Cost Recovery Act. Mr. Speaker, I've listened with great interest to the previous speakers here today, especially to the dissertation given by my honourable colleague from Richmond, who made some excellent points, Mr. Speaker. The fact that this legislation will allow us, well, I thought the second part of his presentation was the best, Mr. Speaker, actually. This legislation will allow us actually to take on the big tobacco companies. Now, I know there's a matter of discussion whether or not we're Johnny-come-latelys here, jumping on the train that was started by British Columbia, and whether or not we should be there, whether or not we belong there, whether or not how much money we're going to get, how much time it's going to take to recover that money from the big tobacco companies. But I think the first question, the overall question that should be asked is whether or not we should be there. And the answer is, of course we should be there. We should have been there a long time ago. We should have been there from the very beginning, because it's nothing new to anyone in this legislature that tobacco causes illness. Tobacco kills. Tobacco-related illnesses are a fact, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately. They're preventable. They're totally preventable. Ask any doctor. The doctor will tell you, you will not suffer from a tobacco-related illness if you don't smoke tobacco or if you don't work around secondhand smoke or whatever the case may be. So we all know that. But when British Columbia started the whole process to be able to take action against the big tobacco companies and recover any costs related that are related to tobacco-related illnesses, Mr. Speaker, as is the case with many times over the past several years that this government delayed. Let's wait. Let's wait. Well, Mr. Speaker, again, sometimes that delay, that inaction, causes problems in itself. You need look no further than the third page of the Chronicle Herald today. And on the third page of today's Chronicle Herald, there's a headline that says, "Health spending alarm sounded." Now the story comes from officials who were warning that the entire provincial budget is going to be needed by the year 2025 if present spending rates continue. That's not too far away, Mr. Speaker. That's not too far away. When we talk about, well, this is from this conference says that by 2025, but there have been some revisions that say it could be as close as the year 2020. If you think about how long this legislation would take, how long the court battle, and we all know how long these big court battles can take because we've seen many of them over the years, whether they be here in Canada or the United States, and they can drag on, and they can take several years. But, Mr. Speaker, if those several years lead us to the year, I don't think they'd ever lead us to the year 2020. I think that's stretching it. But if they lead us down the road, the case may be we could use the money. We might be able to use the money at that particular time to pour into the health system to take care of what's happening within our healthcare system. And officials are warning. They're telling us, even at this primary healthcare conference, they're telling us that because of the number of people who are not healthy in this province, who are smoking, for instance, we're going to be running into more, and it'll cost more to take care of those people in the future. Mr. Speaker, because of that, I think that's why this legislation, that's the human factor in all of this. How many lives will we actually save over that amount of time? How much money could we make to possibly treat the illnesses? Mr. Speaker, I think the government House Leader is motioning to me, either he's really enjoying the speech or he's asking me to perhaps entertain a motion to adjourn at this time. Mr. Speaker, if I would so move then.
Thank you. The motion is for adjournment of debate on Bill number 222. Agreed? Agreed. Motion is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader on Monday's hours and order of business.
I'll rise to meet again on Monday at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit from 2 till 10, and the order of business will be public bills for third reading, and if we have sufficient time following that, we'll do some private members' public bills for second reading, and other bills, public bills for second reading as well, Mr. Speaker, and any bills that are in committee of the whole House. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that we now rise and everybody meet again on Monday.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. on Monday. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. We're adjourned to 2 p.m. on Monday.